Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Conn Report wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. Also, I will be back after the Commanders game against the Bears Sunday night with the podcast video probably coming out Monday morning, maybe late Sunday night, depending on certain things. Anyway, so just stay tuned for that. Also, before I get into my 5 things I think, I'm going to start with just a couple injury updates, not about Jayden Daniels, because I'm going to get to that in about 30 seconds. So the first one is left tackle Brandon Coleman is out. He's in the concussion protocol. And then defensive end Dorrance Armstrong is questionable with the rib injuries. He was limited, so we'll see what happens. Cleveland Farrell was out there on practice Friday and going through, and so he will play on Sunday. So, of course, the big question is about Jayden Daniels, and that's where I'm going to start my 5 things I think. I think they're going to be very smart with Daniels. So I don't know if he's going to play or not. And nobody, if anybody's telling you they know right now, they don't, unless it's coming from Dan Quinn, Adam Peters, or Jayden Daniels himself. And even then, I still think that they view this as a game time decision. That would be my sense right now. I think they're going to be very careful with Daniels. I think they're obviously very cognizant of what he means in the franchise, et cetera. But here's what we learned on Friday. So bear with me for a second. So in case you didn't know, when the media was out there, we get to watch about 20 minutes or so on Friday. And they don't do a whole lot. Like they just there's some walkthrough, just individual work. We'll see them doing a lot of red zone work, and then they go into a team situation. During that time, typically the quarterbacks are in a separate field when the players are stretching and going through some drills. The quarterbacks are in the other field. They're having their usual Friday stuff. They're drills thrown into the net, thrown in the garbage can in the corner of the field. Well, this time they weren't doing any of that when we were out there. They were doing whatever they were doing was up in the practice bubble while we were down at the field watching the other players. While we are down there, we see 3 quarterbacks come down there, Driscoll, Hartman, Mariota, no Jayden Daniels. We find out later that he was in the weight room or in the building getting some core work with strength and conditioning. Then we learned that he was out there later during practice. So the question then is, what can he do and how does he react to going through some of these workouts over a few days? It's not like he was sedentary in the last few days. He just didn't practice, but certainly he was doing some things. So how does his body respond? How did the ribs feel on Saturday after going through this? They did test him on the suddenness. They did test him with some blitzes because you've got to see how his movements are and then how he's throwing. So they put him through a series of tests to make sure to see where he's at. And so Daniels told us he felt good. He, of course, wants to play on Sunday. Of course he does. But he knows it's up to other people. So what I will say here is you can trust what this group, I think, will do. There have been times in the past where it was hard to trust the situation. And I'll go back to RG3 in 2012. So if you remember the infamous Seattle game, and even before then, there was to me, kind of a broken trust between the Shanahans and Griffin and maybe some of the other coaches too. And I think it really played out in that Seattle game. Now, during that game, and I don't want to go through all this stuff but just the reason I'm pointing this out is to say this is a different situation. And this is why I think trust is important and that there aren't any other factors at play here. It's simply about, can he play or not? And back in that game, I remember talking to some of the coaches later, and one of the problems that they had during the Seattle game was, first of all, the trainer, Dr. Andrews said he could play, Robert said he could play. And one of the factors, though, was they knew that if they took him out when they were winning, that they feared what this would do to the relationship and what it going forward. So there were always other things at play when that situation was here. So you don't have that stuff here. It's not like that. Jayden Daniels is nothing like Robert Griffin III. And this staff is nothing like anything else. So it's not, if for those who are worried about that, put that aside, because to me, there's I think you heard Dan Quinn talk the other day about the line of communication between the trainers and the coaching staff and Jayden Daniels. But I also think there's a trust. I think Jayden Daniels trusts that they have his best interests at heart. And I think the coaching staff trusts what Daniels can do and say, what he says on how he's feeling. So I think that's kind of a big deal here. But I think the bigger key is how he feels on Saturday. So if there's any update on Saturday afternoon, check ESPN.com, because I'm sure if he's going to play or if he's ruled out, it will be up. I will have a story up on ESPN.com as fast as possible. So, but right now, as I sit here right now, recording this Friday afternoon, I expect this to go into Sunday. And I do, could there be a level of subterfuge? Of course. I think there's a reason why they didn't want him throwing while we were out there, because we could videotape some of that and then teams are going to see. Now, Dan Quinn said that wasn't it. Okay. But listen, I think I would do the same thing if I were a coach, right? Why would you give the Bears anything to go on right now? But that said, I don't think he's been ruled out by this point. He's listed as questionable. In other words, by internally, I should say. I do think that there's a chance he plays. I do believe this goes into Sunday as of now. And now, of course, he could wake up Saturday and feel miserable or feel awesome. That would change the equation by the time you hear this. But I think that's what I would anticipate. So, yes, some subterfuge. This is not all that. Because keep in mind, well, yeah, you want to make the Bears will prepare for this offense, and this offense isn't going to change a whole lot. Plays might change, strengths and weaknesses of the players change, but the style of the offense isn't going to change. I think it would be a bigger deal if, let's say, you had Jayden Daniels and then they were going to either use him or Carson Wentz or Jacoby Brissett, a different style quarterback. Then you have to prepare a lot differently. Here, the style of offense is not going to change. The run game, a lot of the stuff they do with that is not going to change. So I think that makes it a little bit easier for the Bears, but there's a difference in quarterbacks here as well. So I think that's where you could get into some of that stuff. So number two, I think Mariota I think he's a smart quarterback. I think that helps this offense tremendously. And I think this team has a lot of confidence in him, but also in themselves. This game to me is really big. If Daniels doesn't play, if I'm a coach, if I'm Dan Quinn, I'm selling the possibility like, hey, you guys are more than one guy. Like, as important and as good as Jayden Daniels is, you have a chance to show that it's not just about him. Like, there's something deeper and bigger going on here than just Jayden Daniels. And this, and I also say, like, you don't sit there and say, well, Daniels isn't there, it's okay. No, this is a chance for you to show what kind of team are you? You have a key guy down. What kind of team are you? How do you rise up to that? I think they rise up pretty well. I think this is a pretty close team. I think it's a pretty strong-minded team. I don't think they're going to let this sidetrack them from doing what they might be able to do. And I also think there's a confidence in Mariota. And Bobby Wagner even said the other day, like, some of the stuff that we saw, he's like, hey, we've been seeing that in practice all the time. Now in the summertime, didn't quite see it like that. But I think they have faith in him. And he is a smart quarterback. I was talking to one player about this, and his comment was that this is where the part of the game that's hard to always know. But he said that, Mariota does a really good job of getting them into the right play. That's vital. That's about managing the position. And yes, that is important. The term game manager, every quarterback should be a game manager. It's always been kind of a ridiculous thing to me, because if you can't manage the game as a quarterback, you shouldn't be playing the position. But that's one thing that they like about Mariota, is the ability to get them in and out, or into a good play or out of a bad play. And listen, when Peyton Manning was at the end of his career, I'm not comparing the two. I'm just saying the importance of that. When you'd watch the Broncos with Manning at the end of his career, he could not throw very well, but he could manage the game. And that alone made him an effective quarterback. So you can do all that stuff with him. A key will be, another key to me is he's got a lot of work with the starters. So he got work with the starters in the spring before Jayden Daniels got here. And even after Daniels got here, the way they handled the whole competing for a starting job, he would have multiple days of reps with the starters first. So he was able to build up a little bit of rapport and knowledge and bank some knowledge about these guys before you get to this point. And as Cliff Kingsbury said, though, one thing keep in mind, like, he didn't take any snaps with the first team for 68 days before he played on Sunday. So that's a hard thing to do. So he got a week of reps with them as well. So that matters. He had a good rapport with Terry McLaurin. McLaurin told us that he feels like they have a good bond. Some of them, they worked out in the offseason. They went golfing. So there's a closeness there that I think matters. I think the other thing is that there's a feeling that he goes, while Daniels is very good at escaping the pocket, and he's going to be tremendous as he grows in this area, there was one person was telling me that he felt like with Mariota, a strength of his was how well he extends the plays. Now, there's also times where he probably could have avoided extending the plays by maybe just playing in rhythm, but that he did that. So I do think he's going to have to watch it on Sunday and not make some mistakes, because I think that's all this defense takes the ball away well, but they like that aspect of him. And Daniels is going to be tremendous at that. This is as much about extending and then keeping the play alive, et cetera. And so I think that's something good. And I also think, like I said, I'm going to go back to the start of what I just said about this paragraph, which is, a chance to show something. They always talk about the brotherhood, and you see these little examples of it. Now, I saw this on Monday, when I was rewatching the game, and I asked Bobby Wagner about this. But if you remember, and this is just a little example, but I think it highlights the bond that this team has. So there was a 2nd and 15 where Mariota completes the pass to Terry McLaurin for 19 yards. So it's right in front of the sidelines. Bobby Wagner standing right there. So what I see on the all 22 is Wagner start to go on the field and put his helmet on. I'm like, what the hell is he doing? Because then the film just cuts off. You don't see the rest. So I asked him, like, what were you doing? It's like, I know he's too smart to know that, he saw him catch the ball. But what he saw was McLaurin was laying down on the ground for an extra couple seconds. So he wanted to go help him up. But he also knew if you go on the field without your helmet, you get penalty. So he put his helmet on, went out, helped him up, got off the field. That's the kind of bond that this team had. I don't think I've seen that or heard that before. I just think that's kind of cool. So, but that's where they're at. And I think it's why there's a belief in one another. I think this is a confident team. So I think regardless of Daniels plays or not, I would expect this team to be in the game. I don't think that this is not a lay down type of team. Now, if the Bears are just that much better, all right. But I don't think it's a matter of that they're going to be. I think they've developed they're starting to develop an identity, the toughness, the physicality, et cetera. That will play out, I think, in moments like this.
Hey, it's Bram Weinstein here, voice of the Commanders, and of course, frequent guest of this podcast, The John Keim Report. I wanted to let you all know that my show, which airs at 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. on ESPN 630, is now exclusively produced by Empire Media, my company, and is going to be distributed through our network. So I'm asking you, please, if you subscribe to this show and love this show, give mine a try as well. Subscribe to The Bram Weinstein Show wherever you get your podcasts. And many of the shows and many of the elements that are in the show will be available on the Empire Media YouTube channel. We're going to talk a ton of Commanders and other DC sports. Check it out.
Number 3, I think Cliff Kingsbury, and I've said this before, but I'm going to go back to it for a couple of plays, but I think Cliff Kingsbury's offense is a lot of fun to watch. I will say, watching the Bears offense with Caleb Williams, and I'll get to him in a minute, but there's some things they do that are pretty cool. Like, I like what they're doing as well. But I'm going to focus on Kingsbury because this is the team I cover. So I just think he's a smart play caller. And one of the things that Mariota said earlier in the week was how Kingsbury would go to him as well, in addition to Daniels, and ask what plays he likes or doesn't like. So I asked Mariota, on Thursday, I'm like, how unusual is that? He's like, that hasn't happened to him at other stops. When you're the backup, that typically that does not happen. But I think it just speaks to the detail, and it was very good that he did that because it mattered on Sunday. But I think it just also keeps guys sharp, but it really gives a play caller a better sense in case something happens, which it did. So I think that's good. I like how they use their backups. And just with the depth, I think you're going to talk about Jeremy McNichols in a couple of seconds, but guys like on offense and defense, I like how much they incorporate the backups. I think it's how you develop some depth, right? By playing these guys. Um, but it's also, to me, good coaching because you find what can guys do and then find roles where they can where those skills are highlighted. I just think that's very smart. Anyways, the creative use, like I talked about the unbalanced line the other day. So let's go back to that for a second. And, talking to some of the linemen, like they definitely could hear confusion, right, by the Carolina defense. And it's not the first time they use it. They've used it in other games. Like it's just the first time where, I just wanted to talk about it more, but it was a smart way that they use it. The Panthers defense was banged up. They're missing key guys. So test them on the communication. And they did that. And it's again, smart coaching. You go know how to, you get them to, can they read it all at the same time? So in talking to the linemen, I would expect them to perhaps try it against the Bears. But the key is if you get it to them in a no huddle situation, a hurry up situation, do they recognize it? And do they all recognize it? Because if they don't all recognize it, the defense, you may get, there's some techniques that teams would play or they would call like establishing a new center. So for example, if Wiley is lined up as a tight end on the left side next to, Sunday would be Cornelius Lucas, well, the teams would identify the new center, quote unquote, as Nick Allegretti, the left guard. Well, some teams may identify it that way, or excuse me, some players, but what if all the players on the line don't get it? That's when problems start to occur. And that's what happened against the Panthers for sure. So that's one thing. But again, it's just a test. Do they all get it? Because if they don't, you get a big gap to cut back. And that's what happened. I think that's something to watch for on Sunday. You also have bigger guys blocking down. You have quick guys pulling as a tight end. The tight end's another key here. Their tight ends are good blockers. And I think without that, I think it'd be harder to do that. But because they are, teams have to honor that as well. Another alignment that I like is when you'll have Jayden Daniels, the quarterback, in shotgun formation, and to the left or to the right, you'll have two backs. And basically in an I formation, just not in the traditional I, but they'll be next to the quarterback. You have Eckler in front and McNichols in the back. Eckler told me that's one of his favorite plays or favorite alignments because of the opportunities that it presents and the confusion it can cause for a defense. So he said he's never run that before because I even asked, like, is that like, you can't call it an I formation necessarily because it's not the traditional I. It's certainly not an offset I, even though it's an I that's offset, right? And so it's just kind of funny. He said he's never used that before, but he said that one of the things Kingsbury is really good at is he'll show them these concepts and then he'll show them clips of what they're trying to do with it, what they're trying to get. So it gives them a deeper understanding as a player about what you're trying to do on this play. What's the purpose of it? What's the why? Because a lot of times players are like, why is this going on? Why are we doing this? Anyways, in this one, you get basically triple reads. So you could have, and for a defense, it makes it difficult. You could motion a guy out. You could send him out on a flare. You could do a lot of things, but it could be a run, it could be a pass, it could be a quarterback keeper off of this. We've seen it all. So that's part of the beauty of that play. And it's also like when they'll have the split, almost like a split backfield with two backs split this time, one on either side of the quarterback. And the Bears will do some of this too, but I love that because you can get some good play action off that. And, it's funny, if any of my former flag football players are listening, I used to run that in flag football. Very, very flag football-ish concept, but it fooled the hell out of the defense. And we would open the games up that, and it would score more often than not. And then you start to run action off that, which is what I loved. And you see this here, like you could see, there's some screens that you can run off that for sure. And it's actually what they scored on, but they can get some screens off that or some fake, whatever. So it's an effective play. Anyways, that little, whatever you want to call it, the eye that's offset or next to the quarterback is a play that Eckler really likes. And I think along with that, like the unbalanced stuff, and that's becoming maybe, I know some other teams do this, but it's also, I think when you have that, you have players that build confidence in the play caller because the stuff is working and because it's fun. And I think it provides energy in the room as well. So, and I also said that I like that they use McNichols because the guy earned playing time and they're giving it to him. A lot of times teams would not do that. They would just stick with Eckler and Robinson because that's traditional one. this staff doesn't always think traditional, and I think that's a fun thing, and I think it's both sides of the ball. And I think for a 17-game season, you want to build up that depth. Both sides, right? And I think that's why you look at the defensive line. I told you Daron Payne the other day, not playing as much as he did before. That's good. And I think you're going to get them in all the positions. And I think it's also like, I asked Joe Witt about this the other day, and it's like, listen, like Percy Butler, he really likes what he's doing. So they're trying to find ways to get him in. Emmanuel Forbes has earned more reps, and he did a good job the other day. And so, that leads to more reps, but also builds confidence. I think it just sharpens focus during the week, because guys know if you're showing something, you're going to get in the game, and that's what everybody wants for sure. Anyway, number 3, Dante Fowler. I think he's been a good pickup, and I want to highlight a couple plays from the other day just to go over the savviness, and it's not just about the touchdown. In fact, there's one play where he says that was his favorite play, and it wasn't the touchdown. But I did like, and I don't even know you need to go over the touchdown one. Like, that was good pressure, right spot, cover the screen, right there, bad throw, boom, jukes it. The funny thing on that one, so he said after he juked Andy Dalton, he's run down the field and Daron Payne's behind him. He said that Daron Payne was yelling at him, bro, he's coming, talking about Miles Sanders. And so Fowler said he looked up at the scoreboard and he can see Miles Sanders hauling ass. So he's like, he just hoped that he could get to the end zone before Sanders got him, and he did. So, but the play that he really liked, there were a few that he made some big plays. The play he really liked was the 4th and 1 stop, because it highlighted a couple of things. It speaks to, I think, the intelligence of the player, and then the quickness, and it's just a big stop. So on the play, he sees one of the linemen looking down hard, like looking hard over to where he's going to go. So he knew where that play was, probably that it was going to be obvious to run. It's a 4th and 1, not obvious, but you could just tell by the lineman. He could tell where he's looking. And then he said the weird thing was that the tight end was split a little bit wider from the tight end. So he knew he probably wasn't going to block him, but he was lined up over the tight end. So if you remember, so because of this, because he reads this, Fowler, right, he waits the right time, right before the snap, boom, he goes, shoots through that. He shoots inside the tight end. He scoots inside, shoots inside, and then makes the stop. But that was a very heads up, savvy veteran play. And that's why I think he liked it so much. So there you go. And then the last one we got here, the Bears are a good team. I think the Bears are good. How's that? But I think this is a really good chance for Washington to show just how strong a team they are as well. So let's take, it's funny because they're kind of similar. I've gotten a kick out of seeing some of the comments between the fan bases. There's a lot of similarities here. Like, neither team has had that massive signature win. I think Washington's had some good wins, like back-to-back on the road, winning on Monday night at Cincinnati against a desperate team at home. I mean, that's a really good win. I think some of these winning at Arizona after they had just blown out, or they a couple weeks earlier blown out the Rams. So I think there's a lot of good things that they have shown. And I think the way they've taken care of bad teams is really good. The Bears have done the same thing. They both had a couple losses. The Bears haven't beaten anybody with a team that beaten a team with more than 2 wins currently, but I still think they're a good team. And there's a lot to like about what they have and where they're going. And I think it's funny too, because I think both teams can rightly feel that they have their quarterback. And I think there's and it's funny because there's a lot of snipping back and forth about who's the better quarterback. Well, I think we'll hopefully have a good decade to figure that out. I think it's funny that you hear this stuff about, well, Jayden Daniels is only a 1-read thrower. No, he's not. That kid's a really smart quarterback. And I would say Caleb Williams is really starting to do a nice job. The last three games, he's been really good, and he's fun to watch. I think he's going to be a good quarterback. It's okay for both teams to have found their guy. I do know, that how much this team liked Jayden Daniels, and I think if there was a choice between the two, I think they would have taken Jayden Daniels based on what I heard way back in January, shortly after the draft. But is there truth? Is that 100% accurate? I can't say because the choice wasn't there. So we don't know what would have happened. Point is, they really like Jayden Daniels. And guess what? The Bears, after a while, didn't bring Jayden Daniels in because they love Caleb Williams. That's great. I think they both got a really good spot, quarterback for themselves. And that's what's going to make this fun. To be honest, I hope this is something that we get to watch where these two kids flourish for a long time. I think that'd be great for the league. I think it'd be great for these two desperate or hungry fan bases, and fan bases that deserve something really good at quarterback for a change. Caleb looks sharper the last three games in particular. So I think there's been an emphasis, and when you're talking to people there, like an emphasis on playing more from the pocket. You can see that early in the year. There were a couple times he got sacked where he started, instead of trying to get out, climb the pocket, move out, he's just drifting back and putting himself in a worse spot. You're seeing him handle some of those situations better. He's only had one interception in the last three games, but I do think he takes a few more chances, and that could get him into some trouble, right? So I think that's something to watch. Can you put some pressure on him? Can you keep him tight in the pocket? There's a definite chance for that if you have a good disciplined rush. Great job extending plays and making plays. He's not always doing that. I think it's funny because a lot of his highlights from college, that was what he was doing. Well, that's not all he does. He's becoming he's a good passer. I mean, there's a lot of skill that he has. And again, he's fun to watch. And I think this offense can be fun to watch. They do some fun things as well. I brought up Cliff Kingsbury. Well, I think the Bears do some good things too. They have a lot of weapons to work with DJ Moore, Odunze, and Keenan Allen, but also Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift. The screen game is dangerous, folks. They'll throw a screen, and then you have the next play. They'll fake a bubble to DJ Moore, turn and fake the screen to Swift, and then hit Cole Kmet down the seam for a touchdown. That's what happened against Jacksonville. Cole Kmet is dangerous because you can lose sight of him because of the action of the play, and that's where it's going to be a hard thing. But again, so much of this starts with Caleb Williams. You could see, I haven't watched every game, but you could see some progress from him for sure. And I think the other thing for Washington, you've got to make them one-dimensional. And they did a good job of stopping Carolina's run game. And talking to people there, part of what they thought it was that Carolina's run game doesn't do a lot of stuff before the snap. You watch Washington's run game, they're doing the guard tackle, the guard tackle pulls and there, but there's motion, there's the jet action, there's a lot of action in the play where your eyes can get fooled and diverted, right? You didn't see that with Carolina, and you don't see that as much with Chicago. And I think that's something to watch. If they stop the Bears run game, they were very gap disciplined last week. If that happens again, that could be part of the reason why, is they don't do as much with the bells and whistles before the snap to try and fool your eyes a little bit. And I think certainly not like what Washington's run game is talking to one defenders, like it was hard for them to defend in practice because of that. So anyway, just something to watch. And, but again, going back to Caleb, so much of it starts with him, and he will put some stuff up for grabs at times. Like there was one time against Houston, one of his picks where he just gets forced outside the pocket and he's got a guy open underneath, but he throws it down the field to someone else. I don't know why, because there were three defenders there. So you see that on occasion, right? So if there's an area you can kind of get him to do, maybe that's what it is. I also think you can take advantage of, I'm not sold on their offensive line. I think there was pressure from the both tackle spots that you can get to as well. He's been sacked 20 times, but you can get that. If you can get that condensed pocket, I think you can do some things. And you want to keep him in that pocket, of course. So that's going to be a big key. But I do think like the left tackle, there were a couple times I saw him certainly get both tackles, right tackle as well. So if you're Cleveland Farrell, and then Dante Fowler, who's again having a good year, I think those are some areas you can do, and then some pressures as well. So, but secondary's got to hold up if you do that, because they have some really good receivers in the red zone or inside the 25. Even watch for the double moves. If you're a defensive back, you've got to watch for those double moves. That there were multiple times I saw, whether it's DJ Moore or Dunze, whomever, watch the double moves, and you would get teams to bite. Now, in two games I watched, Caleb Williams was not accurate in there at all, right? He was like 2 for 7, something like 2 for 7, 2 for 6, whatever, in back-to-back games. So you check out the numbers, and in all the other games, he's pretty accurate down there. So you have to be careful. So you have to be aware of the double moves down there. They are good at that, and he's going to take a shot with that. And sometimes there were definitely some misses, and some, I'd say, bad misses, like they weren't close. But other times, right there, touchdowns, be careful because he actually his numbers overall inside that area are actually pretty good. So there's just 2 games that I saw, but if you can put some pressure maybe on him, then it would help for sure. But again, I like him. I think he's doing. I think he's improving, certainly for sure. And I think he's going to be a pain in the ass for Washington on Sunday because there's a good talent around him. That screen game, man, you've got to watch that because that's something they do very well. On the other side of the ball, oh, by the way, they do, like I said, they do some creative things with the running backs as well. So I just think that's going to be, and I think I already said that, but they'll do some of those 2 backs and all that. And they'll put Komet as a fullback sometimes in an I formation and then get him out on some routes, get him on maybe on a choice route with a linebacker, makes it tougher on them. So they use their talent in a good way. I like what they're doing there, and I like where that's headed. On defense, they haven't faced a lot of good offense. So they have really good numbers on defense. And I think it's a good defense, but how good is a D? Well, to me, it's still, I think, they're going to enter a real buzzsaw in that division. So we'll know more at the end of the year. Right now, they're doing well against teams that don't have really good quarterbacks or good offenses. So we'll see. That's not to say they're not good. It's just to say, I think there's more to learn about them for sure. But I think what you have to respect is how well they take the ball away. They will be without 2 defensive backs. Jaquan Brisker, liked him coming out of Penn State. Kyle Gordon, a corner. Brisker, I think, sets a good tone in that secondary. Still good players there. Jalen Johnson, a corner, really good. He's got good length, and I think teams don't challenge him all that often. One of the things he does well is he will take away the receivers. He's going to get you to turn to his side and take that away. The key is we'll just attack as when you basically attack his feet, get him to open up, and then you got him, right? So I think that's one thing to watch, how much they go after him. So, but he's more of a field corner, sort of the boundary side. So, if you can get your guy on the boundary, you get a better shot. So anyways, they have there is good talent. Montez Sweat, him. He's doing what Montez Sweat does. Only has 3 sacks, but he's also set up multiple others. He's pretty much what he is, right? That's who he is. It's what he's been. You still have to account for him. He's got the strength. He knows this team well. He's went up against Andrew Wiley a number of times, of course, in practice. Watch him getting upfield, coming inside, using that power. If I'm them, Washington does a really good job of chipping the ends when there are good ends to chip. And I would expect them to do a lot of that against Montez Sweat because he is a good defensive end. And they have Edmonds in the middle on defense, a big free agent signing. And as talking to someone there, that you don't see the flash plays from him. When I'm watching some of their big runs against them, the 10+ yard runs, he's not really a factor, and you can get to him and take him out in those situations, get him to pause and get a lineman coming up on him. And I think you can get to him, just give him some of that eye candy to make him just kind of hesitate. I think that will help. Like I said, I think it's a good defense. They have Billings inside. He's a big fella, short, 6'1", about 315 or so. He can be a pain in the butt inside. But one of the things the Bears did well last year, they had another big tackle next to him. So it did a good job taking the run away inside. They don't have that same size inside. So you can run a little bit more inside on this team, I think, than you were able to do probably last year. So I think that's something to watch as well. So really good matchup. And I think it should be a fun game. Again, so much of it depends on what does Jayden Daniels do? Does he play? Do they allow him to play? I do think you can trust the decision. This is football. Guys get hurt. You don't want to see it, but it does happen. It happens with every team. But I think what you want to do is trust the decision-making process. And I think it's a good one here. If he can't go, I think if there's any doubt, I think they will sit him because they know there are a lot of games left. That impacts his game. I do believe this team will put up if Jayden Daniels doesn't play, I still think this team can win this game, and I think they'll put up a very good game. I like this Bears team. That's a hell of a division they're in, and my gosh, if they come out of whoever comes out of there is going to be really good. But I think the Bears are going to be a fun team to watch for a while, as I think Washington is. This could be the first of many matchups between these quarterbacks and these teams over the next few years and there should be perhaps because of that, some bigger games down the road. Anyways, looking forward to it. Again, I'll be back after the game. We're wrapping up the Commanders Bears. Join me there. As always, thank you for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next time.